Yeah, and the interesting thing with you is generally when we have authors on the show, they either write memoirs or they write these fiction thrillers. You've done both.
Yeah, well, I haven't written a memoir myself.
But
I've
you've written
written,
nonfiction, I mean.
yeah, that's right. Yeah, I wrote a history of the war in Afghanistan, but a social history. So not a military history of the war, but like what the conflict's actually about. Um, in part because when I was there, I found that there's a question that people should have been able to answer that nobody could give me a straight answer, and it was a simple one. It's when did the war in Afghanistan start? And so people would say, oh, well, 9/11. It's like, no, no, that's when we showed up. Like, this is like, when did this war start? And people, oh, well, the Soviets, um, or the Anglo-Afghan wars in the 19th century, or Alexander the Great, or they've always been fighting. And it's all this kind of nonsensical answers. I was like, no, no, like this war, the one we're in right now, that you and me that we're doing, when did it start? And I didn't think that anybody had a satisfactory answer, and I didn't think I had one either. And so over, being there over many years, I was asking questions about of all kinds of people, like, what do you think? Where is this coming from? What is driving this? And so that drove me to write a pretty substantial, serious nonfiction book about it.
I know you want people to pick up the book, obviously, but from your expert perspective of doing the research, when did it start?
Haha. Yeah, so I revealed the answer in the first few pages. So there's no spoilers here. And the book's called Blood Washing Blood,
Yeah,
Afghanistan's 100-Year War, which kind of gives it away as well.
sure.
Um, but I think that you can kind of pin it down to a date. It's the 20th of February, 1919. Um, and why that date? The emir, the king of Afghanistan, was assassinated, probably by his son, while sleeping in his tent at his hunting camp. Someone put a revolver behind his ear and killed him. Um, and the his replacement, the young emir, saw himself as a reformer, and so he did all kinds of stuff that really sounds modern to us. He put girls in schools. He outlawed the veil. He tried to reform law to become secular rather than religious. He made his wife the minister of education. Did all kinds of stuff, and that frankly we tried to do too. Um, and predictably, when he did this, the country lost their minds. There were uprisings, but there were uprisings in all the same places that were bad places in 2011, or 2002. All the same places, all the same people, all the same families, all the same tribes. And so you can trace this social conflict over issues of whether power is centralized in Kabul or decentralized in the regions, whether it's a secular power or a religious power. You can see this argument essentially carrying on for 100 years, and breaking out into fighting pretty regularly. And so the Soviets being there, us being there, this is all secondary. Like they're Afghans fighting Afghans over Afghan stuff.
Yeah. What was your feeling of on the withdrawal from Afghanistan? Because I feel like every veteran we've had on has very strong feelings on the way it was left, the equipment that was left behind, and a lot of guys are like, "What did we accomplish? Why did we even go over there?" And I think you're even seeing more veteran suicides over things like that because people do want to obviously believe that their sacrifice for all those years in that region was for something, and a lot of guys are finding hard to pinpoint like anything positive that was accomplished when you look at the way it was left behind.
Yeah, I don't think there is really much anything positive that was accomplished that you can point your fingers at, other than 20 years of relative modernization, not even stability. And that's what we bought collectively was 20 years of a chance. But I think, like, unfortunately, I think the war was lost in about 2005. Um, and everything after that, was kind of shoring up a crumbling house. And it was lost, I think, because we didn't really take advantage of a small window in time when there could have been modernization and reforms, and we didn't do it. We kind of took the easy road. And some of that easy road was allying with frankly reprehensible, warlords, with various regional power brokers is maybe the more polite phrase for it, and it, getting tainted with their stuff, right? So is it, what do I think about it? It's upsetting, it's frustrating, but also I've been sort of saying, hey, there's a problem since about 2005, and so I'm not really surprised that that's how it ended. It had to end sometime.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring up 2005 because so I'm 38, so and I'm in the US, unlike you. So the first presidential election I ever voted in was John Kerry versus George Bush for George Bush's
Right.
second term. And beyond the conservative and liberal differences, I think the main point of that election, more than really anything, and it was the number one thing we were talking about, you had George Bush on one side saying we need to finish the job and you John Kerry saying we need to withdraw now. And regardless of how people feel about all their other positions, because it's
Sure.
obviously a plethora of other opinions on things, it's
Yeah.
hard to imagine what things would have been like if we withdrew 20 years ago, which is when John Kerry would have become president had he won that election. It would have been a totally different ball game. Maybe positive, maybe negative, but things would have
Yeah.
been very different.
Yeah, that's right. And because at that sort of moment in time, the Taliban were actually defeated. Um, that scattered. They didn't have the power that they had even 2 years later. Um, and so, yeah, I think you could craft a strategy of, withdrawal of most of the ground troops, some kind of special forces presence, some kind of strike capability to disrupt, and Afghanistan doesn't become a perfect model of Western democracy in Southwest Asia, but it also doesn't go the other way. And so what was good enough, and maybe it could have been good enough.
Yeah, I always think about this prior to even doing this podcast or this, show that we do. When I was working at SOFREP, I interviewed Dan Hampton, who's a fighter pilot, and he was talking about problems with American foreign policy. And I always just remember what he said was that he said America and probably Canada as well is very good at what he called terrorist whack-a-mole. Like, we hunt down
Right.
these terrorists, but just like the game whack-a-mole, they keep popping up. And there really is no easy solution, and it's like in order to fight this, you need to fight the heart of the ideology and make terrorism not be cool, for lack of a better way of putting it, in these regions, because otherwise, more and more terrorists are going to pop up, and I think that's for like every war regarding terrorism. I think if you look at what's going on now in Gaza, no matter what people think about this war, there's going to be a lot of new terrorists created when things change.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, for every person that's killed or injured, you're creating new radicals, right? Like,
Sure.
and that's not unreasonable given the situation, right? Like if uh, you kind of can all see ourselves becoming radicalized if it's our family and our houses and all that
Yeah.
are getting destroyed, right? It's Yeah, the terrorist whack-a-mole thing is definitely an issue. Certainly not a popular idea, but when you look at like British colonialism, right, as a different model of with a tremendous number of negatives, but a different model. Obviously, the like those British service officers spoke local languages, you knew local customs, and expected to live in these places for years in order to become integrated and to really understand the societies that they're dealing with. Completely different than the more modern model of isolated bases, people rotating in and out, very little real contact with the local population. So if we were really serious, and that Afghanistan needed to become a functioning Western style democracy, then they needed to build PMQs, like married quarters in Kandahar, and post people there, and stick them there for years. Um, but no, we weren't willing to do that. So short of that, the outcome's not really a big surprise.
Yeah, and then in opposition to that, you have a lot of people, a lot of them who have been on the show who are like, we shouldn't be there for regime
Yeah,
change or to be the world police. We should
right.
be there to kill terrorists and leave.
Yeah, that's right. I think that's the other option, right? Like either, and we took the middle path, right? Like we didn't do the light boots on the ground strike package, just kind of disrupt, and we didn't do the let's move our families over here and really make this work. We picked something in the middle, and it was obviously messy.
Thanks for checking out Battle Line Podcast. This is just a smaller clip from our latest episode, which you can check out in its entirety by clicking here. While you're watching, be sure to hit the subscribe button and thumbs up the video to show your support. Now, if you'd really like to help us out, click the thanks button below to make a donation. It goes directly to us in keeping Battle Line Podcast going.